A blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty plains of Wyoming territory as Lily Sullivan huddled in the corner of her father's dilapidated barn, her knees pulled tight against her chest. The splintered wood of the barn walls seemed to close in around her as darkness fell, bringing with it the bone-chilling cold of an early spring night in 1876. 3 days. She had been locked in here 3 days without proper food or comfort, all because she had dared to speak her mind about the future her father had planned for her. The wind howled through the cracks of the weathered barn, carrying with it the distant sound of hoofbeats. Lily raised her head, her heart quickening. The hoofbeats grew louder, more distinct. Someone was approaching the Sullivan ranch. Samuel Sullivan was not a man known for his kindness. Since the death of Lily's mother 5 years ago, he had grown increasingly bitter and controlling. The ranch was failing, the drought had taken much of their cattle, and debts were mounting. His solution had been simple. Marry Lily off to Harold Wickham, the aging banker who held their mortgage, a man 40 years her senior with cold eyes and grasping hands. When Lily had refused, her father's rage had been swift and terrible. He had dragged her to the barn, thrown her inside, and locked the heavy wooden door with an iron padlock. "You'll stay here until you come to your senses, girl," he had spat through the small gap in the door. "Wickham will be here in a week to claim what's his." Now, as the hoofbeats stopped outside, Lily heard voices, her father's angry growl and another voice, deeper and unfamiliar. She crept closer to the barn door, pressing her ear against the rough wood. "I'm telling you, mister, we don't need no ranch hand," her father was saying. "You're wasting your time here." "I heard in town you lost half your herd in the winter," came the reply. "One man can't run this spread alone, especially with calving season coming." Lily could picture her father's face reddening with anger and wounded pride. "What goes on at the Sullivan Ranch is my business. Now get off my property before I reach for my shotgun." A pause followed, and Lily held her breath, afraid the stranger would leave and with him any chance of help. "I noticed your barn doors padlocked," the stranger said, his tone casual but with an edge of suspicion. "That's mighty unusual this time of year. What I do with my property is none of your concern." Her father's voice was dangerous now. "Folks in town are talking, Sullivan. They say your daughter hasn't been seen for days." Lily's heart leapt. Someone had noticed her absence. She had friends in Timber Creek, women she'd grown up with, and Mrs. Peterson, who ran the general store. Had they been asking questions? "My daughter is none of your business either, Cowboy." Her father's voice was closer now, as if he was walking the stranger back to his horse. "She's resting. Been poorly. Now I suggest you move on." The hoofbeats resumed, growing fainter. Lily's heart sank as she realized the stranger was leaving. She slumped back against the wall, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. Another night in the cold barn loomed ahead of her. Another night closer to the arrival of Harold Wickham. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. Through a small gap in the barn's roof, Lily could see stars appearing in the in-sky sky. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to conserve warmth. Her stomach growled painfully. Her father had been giving her just enough food and water to keep her alive, a cruel reminder of his power over her. Hours passed. Lily dozed fitfully, startling awake at every sound. The ranch had fallen silent. Her father would be asleep by now, probably passed out from the whiskey he drank every night to dull his own miseries. A soft noise outside the barn made Lily freeze. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too careful to be an animal. She held her breath, listening intently. Metal scraped against metal. Someone was at the padlock. Lily scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against the wall, her mind racing with possibilities. Had her father changed his mind? Was it Wickham, come early to claim his unwilling bride? The lock gave way with a soft click, and the barn door inched open. Silhouetted against the starlit night stood a tall figure, a man in a wide-brimmed hat. "Miss Sullivan," the voice was low, the same one she had heard earlier arguing with her father. "Who are you?" Lily's voice cracked from disuse. The man stepped inside, just enough for Lily to make out his features in the dim light. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His eyes, though she couldn't discern their color in the darkness, were intent and alert. "Name's Preston Northcott," he said. "I heard talk in town about you missing church and social calls. Folk were worried." He glanced back at the door he'd just unlocked. "Seems they had reason to be." Lily took a hesitant step forward. "My father will kill you if he finds you here." A wry smile touched Preston's lips. "Your father's sleeping off a bottle of whiskey, I checked. He won't be waking until morning." He extended a hand toward her, his expression softening. "You're free now, Miss Sullivan. You don't have to go back to him." Lily stared at his outstretched hand, paralyzed by fear and hope in equal measure. "Where would I go? He'll find me." "I've got a horse waiting," Preston said. "We can be in Timber Creek before dawn. Sheriff Miller's a fair man. He'll listen to what your father's done." Lily hesitated. She had lived her entire 22 years under her father's roof, the last 5 under his increasingly tyrannical rule. The thought of defying him completely terrified her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You don't know me." Preston's gaze held her steadily. "I know enough. I know no one deserves to be locked up like an animal, and I know about Wickham's plans." His jaw tightened. "That's no fate for any woman, least of all one forced into it." The mention of Wickham decided her. Lily stepped forward and took Preston's offered hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was gentle as he led her from the barn into the cool night air. True to his word, a horse was waiting, tethered to a fence post a safe distance from the house. Preston helped Lily mount, then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his presence, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the careful way his arms came around her to take the reins. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "We've got a long ride ahead." As they rode away from the only home she had ever known, Lily felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. Behind them, the Sullivan ranch grew smaller in the moonlight. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also, perhaps, freedom. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead as Preston guided his horse along back trails, avoiding the main road where they might be seen. Lily found herself relaxing incrementally as the miles passed, the tension of 3 days' captivity slowly ebbing from her body. "How did you know?" she asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. "About me being locked in the barn." Preston adjusted his hold on the reins. "I've been working my way through the territory for the past month, looking for ranch work. Stopped in Timber Creek 3 days ago and heard worried talk about you. The storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Peterson. She was particular concerned when your father came to town alone, buying supplies only for himself." "Martha Peterson," Lily said softly. "She was my mother's closest friend." "She suspected something wasn't right," Preston continued. "Then I overheard your father at the saloon, drunk and boasting about how he'd solved his financial troubles by securing you a wealthy husband, the way he talked." Preston's voice hardened. "No decent man talks about his daughter that way." Lily shivered, and not from the cold. "Wickham has wanted me since I was 16. My father always refused before he said he'd never sell his only daughter to that old vulture, but the drought changed everything. We lost so much of the herd and the debts kept mounting. That's no excuse for what he's done," Preston said firmly. A man protects his family, he doesn't trade them away. They fell silent again. The steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the gentle rocking motion began to lull Lily into a drowsy state. Exhausted from days of anxiety and discomfort, she found herself leaning back against Preston's chest, her eyelids growing heavy. "Rest if you can," he said softly. "I'll wake you when we reach town." Lily meant to protest that she was fine, but the words never came. Instead, surrounded by the unfamiliar but comforting presence of this stranger who had risked himself to help her, she slipped into the first peaceful sleep she had known in days. She woke to Preston gently shaking her shoulder. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, the stars fading as dawn approached. Ahead of them lay Timber Creek, a small collection of buildings nestled in a valley. "We're nearly there," Preston said. "Sheriff's office will be on the main street." He's usually an early riser. Lily straightened, suddenly conscious of how she must look after days in the barn, her hair tangled, her dress dirty and creased. "I can't go into town like this," she said, dismayed. "Everyone will stare." Preston guided the horse off the trail and into a small stand of trees near a creek. "We can stop here for a bit. You can freshen up, and I've got some food in my saddlebags." Gratefully, Lily slid from the horse. Her legs trembled beneath her, stiff from the long ride and weak from days of poor nourishment. Preston steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then led the horse to the creek to drink. While he busied himself with the animal, Lily knelt by the water's edge. The creek ran clear and cold, and she splashed her face, gasping at the chill but welcoming the feeling of cleanliness. She did her best to smooth her hair and brush the dirt from her dress. Preston returned with a small bundle of food jerky, a heel of bread, and an apple. "It's not much," he said apologetically. To Lily, who had been existing on scraps, it looked like a feast. "It's perfect," she said, accepting the food gratefully. "Thank you for everything." They ate in companionable silence as the sky brightened. Birds began to sing in the trees around them, heralding the new day. "May I ask you something?" Lily said finally. Preston nodded. "You said you've been looking for ranch work, but you seem—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "You speak well. You're educated." "Most drifting cowboys aren't." A shadow passed over Preston's face. "I wasn't always a drifter," he said after a moment. "My family had a ranch in Colorado, a good one. My father built it from nothing." His hands tightened around the remains of his breakfast. "We lost it 2 years ago. Drought, then cattle fever. My parents didn't survive the winter that followed." "I'm so sorry," Lily said softly. Preston shrugged, but the casual gesture couldn't hide the pain in his eyes. "Been moving since then. Working where I can, saving what I can. Thought maybe I'd head to California eventually, start fresh." Lily studied him in the growing light. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged, weathered way. His eyes were a deep blue, like the sky just before full dark, and despite the hardship he described, there was a kindness in them that touched her. "We should get moving," Preston said, rising and offering her his hand. "Your father will be waking soon if he hasn't already. We need to reach the sheriff." Sheriff Miller was indeed an early riser. They found him outside his office, sweeping the boardwalk in front of the jailhouse as the town began to stir around him. He was a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper mustache that twitched when he saw them approaching. "Lily Sullivan," he said, leaning his broom against the wall. "Been some folks worried about you, young lady." "Sheriff," Lily acknowledged, suddenly nervous. What if he didn't believe her? What if he sent her back to her father? Preston seemed to sense her anxiety. He stepped slightly forward, not quite placing himself between her and the sheriff, but close enough to offer support. "Miss Sullivan has been through an ordeal, Sheriff," he said quietly. "Her father locked her in their barn for 3 days. He's planning to force her to marry Harold Wickham to settle his debts. Miller's bushy eyebrows rose, and he turned his gaze to Lily. That true, Miss Sullivan? Lily swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, sir. He said I'd stay there until I agreed to marry Mr. Wickham. I would have died there before I agreed. The sheriff's expression darkened. I always knew Sam Sullivan had a mean streak, especially since your ma passed, but this. He shook his head. This crosses a line. Relief flooded through Lily. He believed her. And you, young man, the sheriff continued, turning to Preston. You just happened to be passing by and decided to play hero. I heard talk in town, Preston explained again. Went out to the Sullivan ranch yesterday looking for work, but mostly to see if the rumors were true. His jaw set in a hard line. They were. Sheriff Miller studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Well, Miss Lily, you can't go back there, that's certain. And you, he addressed Preston, you've likely made an enemy of Sam Sullivan, which means you'd best not plan on settling in these parts. I wasn't planning to stay, Preston said, though Lily thought she detected a note of regret in his voice. What will happen to my father? Lily asked, her voice small. Despite everything, he was still her father. She didn't want him harmed, she just wanted to be free of him. That depends, Miller said. I'll ride out there today, have a talk with him. If he's reasonable, maybe this ends with you going your separate ways. If not, he shrugged. Holding someone against their will is a crime, even if it's your own daughter. He studied Lily's exhausted face. For now, I think you need rest. Martha Peterson's been beside herself with worry. I expect she'd be happy to take you in for a spell. Martha Peterson was indeed overjoyed to see Lily. The older woman enveloped her in a warm embrace the moment she stepped into the general store, tears streaming down her plump cheeks. I knew something was wrong, she kept saying. I just knew it. When your father came to town without you, looking like thunder and buying only for himself, I said to Henry, something's happened to our Lily. She held Lily at arm's length, examining her with a critical eye. You're thin as a rail and pale as a sheet. Come upstairs this instant. I've got a hot bath waiting and a proper meal after. Lily glanced back at Preston, who had followed them into the store but was now hanging back, looking somewhat out of place among the bolts of fabric and jars of preserves. You go on, he said with a small smile. I'll check back later to make sure you're settled. You'll do no such thing, young man, Martha declared. You'll join us for a proper breakfast after Lily's had her bath. I won't hear of anything else. Henry, she called to her husband, who was arranging items on a shelf. Show this gentleman where he can wash up while I tend to Lily. The next hour passed in a blur for Lily. Martha's promised hot bath was heaven after days in the filthy barn and a night on horseback. The older woman provided clean clothes, simple but well-made items left behind by her daughter, who had married and moved to Denver the previous year. Feeling human again, Lily descended to the Petersons' comfortable living quarters above the store. The small dining room was filled with the aroma of fresh biscuits, eggs, and coffee. Preston was already seated at the table, looking freshly scrubbed himself, his damp hair combed back from his forehead. He rose when she entered, and their eyes met briefly before both looked away. Martha bustled about, filling plates with food and urging them to eat, her chatter filling the silence. Henry Peterson, a quiet man who had always treated Lily with gentle kindness, occasionally added a comment or question, but mostly seemed content to let his wife dominate the conversation. As they ate, Martha's questions gradually drew out the full story of Lily's ordeal and Preston's rescue. When Lily described being locked in the barn, Martha's usual cheerful expression hardened. Samuel Sullivan was never good enough for your mother, she said firmly. She was an angel, your mother, and he was lucky to have her. When she died, I feared what might become of you left alone with him. She reached across the table to squeeze Lily's hand. "You can stay with us as long as you need, dear. Our home is your home." "That's very generous of you, Mrs. Peterson," Lily said, blinking back tears. "But I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "It'll be a joy to have a young person about the place again. And you can help in the store if you're worried about earning your keep, though there's no need." Henry Peterson cleared his throat. "As for you, Mr. Northcott, we've got a room above the livery stable you can use for a few days, if you're planning to stay in town a while." Preston hesitated. "That's kind, but I should probably move on." As the sheriff said, "I've likely made an enemy of Samuel Sullivan." "Sam Sullivan's bark is worse than his bite," Henry said mildly. "And he won't try anything in town, not with Sheriff Miller watching. At least stay until we know how this all shakes out." Lily found herself hoping Preston would agree. The thought of him riding away, becoming just another drifter passing through, left her with an unexpected hollow feeling. She'd known him less than a day, yet he'd changed her life completely. Preston seemed to be having an internal debate. Finally, he nodded. "I suppose a few days wouldn't hurt, and my horse could use the rest." Relief washed over Lily, though she was careful not to show it. Instead, she focused on her plate, aware of Preston's gaze on her from across the table. After breakfast, exhaustion finally caught up with Lily. Martha showed her to a small but cozy bedroom, her daughter's old room, and urged her to rest. "Sleep as long as you need, dear. Everything looks brighter after a good rest." Lily was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. When she woke, late afternoon sunlight was slanting through the bedroom window. For a moment, disoriented, she feared she was back in the barn, that Preston's rescue had been just a desperate dream. Then the comfortable bed beneath her and the cheerful quilt covering her registered, and she relaxed. She rose, smoothing her borrowed dress, and went downstairs. The store was busy with late-day customers, and Martha beckoned her to the counter with a warm smile. "There she is," Martha announced to the small group of women examining fabric. "Lily Sullivan, back among us and looking much improved after a rest." The women crowded around, their faces concerned and curious. They were neighbors and friends, women Lily had known all her life. Their questions came thick and fast, and Lily found herself once again recounting her ordeal, though in less detail than she had with the Petersons. "Your father should be ashamed," declared Mrs. Holbrook, the blacksmith's wife. "Treating his own daughter like that. And all to pay his debts to that old vulture Wickham," added young Mrs. Carter, who had been in school with Lily. "As if anyone would want to marry that man willingly. Has the sheriff gone out there yet?" asked Mrs. Tanner, the youngest of the group. "He left right after I arrived in town this morning," Lily said. "I haven't heard anything since." As if summoned by her words, the store's door swung open and Sheriff Miller stepped in, removing his hat. The women fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "Ladies," he acknowledged them with a nod. "Mrs. Peterson, Miss Sullivan, might I have a word?" Martha quickly ushered him and Lily to the back of the store, away from curious ears. "What happened, Sheriff? How did Samuel take it?" Miller's expression was grim. "About as well as you'd expect." "Denied everything at first, claimed Lily had run off with some drifter." He glanced at Lily. "When I told him I'd seen the padlock on the barn door myself, he changed his tune, said he was just trying to protect you from making a mistake." Lily's hands clenched into fists. "A mistake?" "He was going to sell me to Harold Wickham. I confronted him about that too," Miller said. "He didn't deny it, said a father has the right to arrange his daughter's future." The sheriff shook his head in disgust. "I told him that's not how things work in my jurisdiction. Forced marriage is no better than kidnapping, far as I'm concerned." "What will happen to him?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's up to you," Miller said. You're of age. If you want to press charges, he'll face a judge, might do some time for what he did." Lily closed her eyes briefly. The thought of her father in jail filled her with complicated emotions. He had been cruel, yes, but he was still the man who had once carried her on his shoulders, who had taught her to ride, who had wept uncontrollably when her mother died. "And if I don't press charges?" she asked. "Then he's free to go about his business," Miller said, "but I made it clear to him that if he tries to interfere with you again, or if he makes trouble for Northcott, I won't be so lenient." "How did he react to that?" Martha asked. Miller's mustache twitched. "Let's just say he used language not fit for ladies' ears, but he knows I mean business. Sam Sullivan's got a temper, but he's not stupid." Lily nodded slowly. "I don't want him in jail," she decided. "I just want to be free of him." "That's your right," Miller agreed. "Just be careful. Men like your father don't take kindly to having their authority challenged." After the sheriff left, Martha tried to distract Lily by involving her in the store's operations, showing her how to measure fabric and record sales in the ledger. Lily appreciated the older woman's efforts, but her mind kept returning to her father and to Preston Northcott. Where was he now? What would he do next? As evening approached and Henry Peterson began closing up the store, the bell above the door jangled one last time. Preston stepped in, looking slightly uncomfortable in the domestic setting. "Mr. Northcott," Martha greeted him warmly. "We were just about to sit down to supper. You'll join us, of course." "I don't want to impose, madam," Preston said, his eyes briefly meeting Lily's before darting away. "Nonsense," Martha insisted. "We've plenty to go around. Besides, I expect Lily would like to hear what you plan to do next." Over a simple but hearty supper of beef stew and cornbread, Preston explained that he had spent the day caring for his horse, inquiring about work in the area, and avoiding the saloon where Samuel Sullivan might be drowning his anger. "Sheriff Miller found me," he added. "Told me what happened out at the ranch. Said your father was plenty angry but likely to keep his distance, at least for now." "Did he tell you I'm not pressing charges?" Lily asked. Preston nodded. "He mentioned it, said it was your choice, though he thought your father deserved worse." "Do you think I'm making a mistake?" Lily asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. Preston considered before answering. "I think it shows you've got a kind heart, even after what he did. Not sure I'd be so forgiving in your place, but it's not my place to judge." The conversation shifted to Preston's plans. He had discovered that the Double T Ranch, the largest operation in the area, was hiring hands for the spring roundup. "It's temporary work," he explained, "but good pay for a few weeks' labor. Thought I might sign on. So you'll be staying in the area?" Martha asked, a hint of matchmaking interest in her voice that made Lily blush. "For a little while, at least," Preston acknowledged. "Seems as good a place as any to earn some money before moving on." The knowledge that he wouldn't be leaving immediately gave Lily a warm feeling that she tried not to examine too closely. After all, what was Preston Northcott to her, beyond a rescuer who had happened to be in the right place at the right time? Yet as the evening wore on and Preston prepared to leave for his room above the livery, Lily found herself reluctant to say goodnight. Standing in the doorway, she fumbled for words. "I don't think I've properly thanked you," she said finally. "For what you did. You risked yourself for a stranger." Preston looked down at his hat, which he was turning in his hands. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Lily said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have minded their own business, especially with my father involved. He's got a reputation." Preston lifted his gaze to meet hers. "Well, I'm glad I was the one who happened along then." There was something in his eyes, a warmth that made Lily's heart beat faster. For a moment she thought he might say more, might even reach for her hand. Instead, he settled his hat on his head and took a step back. "Good night, Miss Sullivan." I'm glad you're safe now. Good night, Mr. Northcott, and please call me Lily." A smile touched his lips. "Then I'm Preston." She watched him walk away down the darkening street, his tall figure gradually swallowed by shadows. Only when he had disappeared completely did she close the door and return to the Petersons' cozy sitting room, where Martha was knitting and Henry was reading his newspaper. Neither commented on her flushed cheeks or the small smile she couldn't quite suppress. But Martha's knowing look made Lily suspect that the older woman was already weaving plans that involved the handsome drifter who had come to her rescue. The next morning, Lily woke early, her body still on ranch time despite her exhaustion. She dressed quickly in another of Martha's daughter's cast-offs, a simple blue calico dress that fit her reasonably well, and went downstairs to help with breakfast. "You're up with the birds," Martha observed as Lily entered the kitchen. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Lily admitted. "I never realized how tense I always was at home, waiting for my father's next outburst." Martha patted her hand. "Well, you're safe now, dear, and today's a new beginning." The morning passed quickly as Lily helped in the store. She discovered she had a knack for retail work. She enjoyed chatting with customers and had an eye for what items to suggest when someone was browsing indecisively. By noon, Martha was declaring her a natural. "You keep this up, and I'll have to offer you a permanent position," the older woman said approvingly. The idea appealed to Lily. Working in the general store would give her independence and allow her to stay in the community she knew. Yet a small part of her wondered if there might be more to life than Timber Creek. She had never been further than the county seat, 50 miles away. The world beyond was a mystery she had only read about in the few books she'd managed to acquire over the years. These thoughts were interrupted by the store's bell announcing a new arrival. Lily looked up from the shelf she was organizing and saw Preston, looking more rested and relaxed than he had the day before. "Good afternoon, ladies," he greeted them, removing his hat. "Mrs. Peterson, Lily." The sound of her name on his lips gave Lily a small thrill. "Preston," she acknowledged. "Have you had any luck finding work?" "As a matter of fact, I have," he said. "Rode out to the Double T this morning. They've hired me on for the roundup starting next week." He hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk this afternoon. The weather's fine, and I thought you might appreciate some fresh air after being cooped up." Before Lily could respond, Martha interjected, "What a lovely idea. Lily, you've been working hard all morning. Why don't you take the rest of the afternoon for yourself? Henry and I can manage the store." Lily gave the older woman a grateful look. "I would like that, Preston, thank you." An hour later, having changed into a sturdier pair of boots borrowed from Martha's collection, Lily found herself walking beside Preston along a quiet path that followed Timber Creek itself. The weather was indeed fine warm for early spring, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of new growth and distant wildflowers. "How are you settling in with the Petersons?" Preston asked as they walked. "They've been so kind," Lily said. "Martha treats me like the daughter she lost to Denver, and Henry is always quietly supportive. I couldn't ask for better people to take me in." "And you're not worried about your father coming to town?" Lily considered the question. "I'm trying not to be. Sheriff Miller seems to think he'll keep his distance, at least for now, and I refuse to live in fear of him anymore." Preston nodded approvingly. "That's brave." "Not as brave as breaking into someone's barn in the middle of the night," Lily countered with a small smile. "That wasn't bravery so much as foolhardiness," Preston admitted. "Your father could have shot me if he'd woken up." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, reaching a bend in the creek where a fallen tree provided a natural bench overlooking the water. By unspoken agreement they sat, watching the creek's clear water flow over stones worn smooth by time. "May I ask you something personal?" Lily ventured after a moment. "Of course." "Why are you really still here? You could have left yesterday." "Most men would have, especially knowing my father's temper." Preston looked out over the water, seeming to consider his answer carefully. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself." He glanced sideways at her. "Part of it is wanting to make sure you're really safe. Part of it is." He trailed off, then shrugged. "I'm tired of drifting. 2 years is a long time to have no place to call home." "And Timber Creek could be that place?" Lily asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Maybe. It's as good as anywhere, better than most, actually. People seem decent here." His eyes met hers. "Some more than decent." Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I think you'd be welcome to stay," she said softly. "Martha and Henry certainly seem to have taken to you." "And you?" The question was quiet, almost hesitant. Lily looked down at her hands folded in her lap. "I think I've taken to you as well," she admitted. "Though we've known each other such a short time." "Sometimes a short time is enough to know," Preston said. Before Lily could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both turn. 3 riders were coming along the path, and with a jolt of alarm, Lily recognized the lead figure's broad shoulders and graying beard. "My father," she whispered, instinctively shrinking back. Preston stood, positioning himself slightly in front of her. "Let me handle this," he said quietly. Samuel Sullivan reined in his horse, his face darkening with anger when he saw Lily. The 2 men with him ranch hands from a neighboring spread. Lily noted hung back a bit, looking uncomfortable. "So this is where you've been hiding," Samuel growled. His eyes shifted to Preston. "And with the drifter who stole you from your home. Should have known." "I didn't steal anyone, Mr. Sullivan," Preston said evenly. "I helped a woman who was being held prisoner against her will." Samuel's face flushed with rage. "She's my daughter. What happens on my ranch is my business." "Not when it involves locking someone in a barn and trying to force them into marriage," Preston countered. "Sheriff Miller seemed to agree with me on that point." Samuel dismounted, his movements clumsy with anger or possibly drink. Lily could smell whiskey from where she sat. "You think you're clever, boy, think you can ride in and play hero." He took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. "You've cost me everything. The deal with Wickham is off. He says he won't buy damaged goods." Lily stood, anger replacing her initial fear. "Is that all I ever was to you?" "Goods to be traded. I'm your daughter." "You're an ungrateful brat," Samuel spat. "After all I've done for you, done for me." Lily's voice rose. "You locked me in a barn. You were going to sell me to a man 3 times my age." Samuel lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. Before he could reach Lily, Preston stepped between them, his stance wide and ready. "That's far enough, Sullivan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Samuel drew up short, clearly not expecting resistance. His companions shifted uneasily on their horses. "Sam," one of them called, "let's just go. This ain't worth it." "Shut up, Davis," Samuel growled. "This is between me and mine." "No, it isn't," Lily said firmly. "Not anymore. I'm not yours, father. I'm my own person, and I choose not to be part of your life anymore." Samuel's face twisted with a mixture of rage and something that might have been hurt. For a brief moment, Lily thought she saw a glimpse of the man her father had once been before grief and drink had hardened him into something unrecognizable. Then the moment passed and his expression settled back into angry contempt. "Fine," he said coldly. "You've made your choice, but don't come crying to me when this drifter gets tired of you and moves on, because you're dead to me now, girl, dead as your mother." The words struck Lily like physical blows, but she stood her ground. "Goodbye, father," she said quietly. Samuel stared at her for a long moment, then abruptly turned away. He mounted his horse clumsily, nearly falling before righting himself in the saddle. "Let's go," he barked to his companions, and without another look at Lily, he wheeled his horse around and galloped back toward town, the other riders following reluctantly behind. When they were out of sight, Lily's legs gave way, and she sank back onto the fallen tree. She was trembling, she realized, reaction setting in now that the confrontation was over. Preston sat beside her, close but not touching. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, not quite trusting her voice. When she had composed herself, she said, "I think that's the first time I've ever truly stood up to him. Even before my mother died, when he was kinder, I always just did as I was told." "You were magnificent," Preston said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. Not many people would have the courage to face down a man like that, especially their own father. "I don't think he's really my father anymore," Lily said sadly. "Not the one I knew as a child. That man died with my mother, I think." Preston hesitated, then gently took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, the calluses from years of ranch work rough, but not unpleasant. "Family is more than blood," he said. "The Petersons care for you like family." And he paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I'm beginning to care for you too. More than I should, perhaps, given how short a time we've known each other." Lily looked up at him, taking in his earnest blue eyes, the way the afternoon sun caught golden highlights in his brown hair, the gentle strength in his face. "I don't think time always matters," she said softly. "Not when it comes to knowing your own heart." Something shifted in Preston's expression, surprise, then hope, then a tentative joy that echoed what Lily felt in her own chest. "Lily," he began, but whatever he was going to say was interrupted by the distant sound of the town church bell, ringing the hour. "We should head back," Lily said reluctantly. "Martha will be worried, especially if word of my father's presence in town has reached her." Preston nodded, standing and offering his hand to help her up. This time, he didn't let go once she was on her feet, and they walked back toward town hand in hand, each lost in thoughts of the unexpected connection forming between them. The next week passed in a blur of new experiences for Lily. Working in the Peterson store gave her a sense of purpose and independence she had never known on her father's ranch. Each day brought new faces, new conversations, and the growing confidence that she could make a life for herself in Timber Creek. Preston came to town most evenings, having begun his work at the Double T. They would take walks together, or sometimes just sit on the Petersons' porch, talking until the stars came out. Lily found herself looking forward to these times with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She was falling in love. She realized perhaps had been since the moment he opened the barn door and offered her freedom. For his part, Preston seemed equally drawn to her. There was a gentleness in the way he looked at her, a care in the way he listened to her dreams and fears, that spoke of feelings deeper than mere friendship or obligation. On the Sunday following her rescue, Lily attended church services with the Petersons. The small white clapboard building was filled with familiar faces, many of whom offered quiet words of support or simply squeezed her hand in silent solidarity. Her father was noticeably absent, though Lily had heard he was still in the area, drowning his grievances in whiskey at the saloon or holed up at his failing ranch. Preston joined them for the service, looking slightly uncomfortable in a clean shirt and his least worn trousers, but determined to make a good impression. Martha had beamed with approval when he appeared at their door, and Henry had given him a respectful nod. As they filed into a pew, Lily was acutely aware of the townspeople's curious glances. By now, everyone knew the story of her imprisonment and rescue, and Preston's role in it had elevated him from anonymous drifter to something approaching local hero. After the service, as people gathered on the church steps to socialize, Lily noticed Harold Wickham across the street, watching the crowd with cold, calculating eyes. The banker was a thin, severe man with a permanent frown etched into his pallid features. When he saw Lily looking his way, he touched his hat in a mockery of politeness that sent a chill down her spine. Preston, noticing her discomfort, followed her gaze. "Is that him?" "Wickham," Lily nodded. "He's the wealthiest man in the county. Owns half the businesses in town and holds mortgages on most of the farms and ranches." Preston's expression hardened. "Including your father's?" "Yes," Lily confirmed. "The drought hit us hard last year. My father had to borrow to keep the ranch going, and when he couldn't make the payments..." She shuddered. "That's when the talk of marriage started. Has he bothered you since you've been in town?" "No," Lily said. "I've seen him watching me a few times, but he hasn't approached me." As if summoned by their conversation, Wickham began to cross the street, his movements precise and deliberate. Preston shifted closer to Lily, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the approaching banker. "Miss Sullivan," Wickham said when he reached them, his thin lips curving in what might charitably be called a smile. "I'm pleased to see you looking well. There have been some concerning rumors about your situation." "Mr. Wickham," Lily acknowledged stiffly. "I'm quite well, thank you." Wickham's cold gaze moved to Preston. "And this must be the gentleman who has appointed himself your protector. How very dramatic." Preston didn't rise to the bait. "Preston Northcott," he said simply, offering no hand to shake. "Yes, I've heard the name," Wickham said dismissively. His attention returned to Lily. "My dear, I hope you realize that your father's financial difficulties remain unresolved. The arrangement he and I had discussed would have benefited you both considerably." "There was never going to be any arrangement, Mr. Wickham," Lily said firmly. "Not one that involved me, at any rate." Wickham's facade of politeness slipped slightly. "Your father owes me a considerable sum, Miss Sullivan. Without some form of accommodation, I fear he will lose the ranch entirely." "That's between you and my father," Lily said. "I'm no longer involved in his affairs." "A pity," Wickham murmured. "I had hoped we might come to a more amicable understanding." Preston stepped forward slightly. "Miss Sullivan has made her position clear, Mr. Wickham. I suggest you respect it." Wickham's eyes narrowed. "You are hardly in a position to make suggestions, Mr. Northcott. A drifting cowhand with no property or prospects to speak of." His gaze flicked between them, calculating. "Although I suppose even such a match would be preferable to remaining under her father's roof, given recent events." Lily felt her face flush with anger. "My choices are none of your concern, sir." "Perhaps not," Wickham conceded with a thin smile. "But do remember, my dear, that this is a small community. Your father has many debts beyond those owed to me, and many friends who may not look kindly on his current predicament. Your continued presence in town might prove difficult." With that veiled threat hanging in the air, he touched the brim of his hat again and walked away, his back straight as a ramrod. "Charming fellow," Preston said quietly when Wickham was out of earshot. Lily let out a shaky breath. "He's dangerous. Not like my father, not with fists or threats, but in a colder way. He ruins people through their debts, takes their land, their businesses." "And he wanted to add you to his collection," Preston said grimly. "No wonder your father thought he had a bargaining chip." The encounter had cast a pall over what had been a pleasant morning. As they walked back to the Petersons' home for Sunday dinner, Lily found herself wondering if Wickham was right. Would her presence in town cause problems for the people who had shown her kindness? Martha, perceptive as always, noticed Lily's distraction during the meal. When the dishes were cleared and Henry had retreated to his chair with a newspaper, she sat beside Lily on the small sofa. "I saw you speaking with Harold Wickham after church," she said without preamble. "That man never brings good news. What did he want?" Lily hesitated, not wanting to worry her benefactors, but Preston answered for her. "He implied that Lily's presence in town might cause trouble," he said. "That her father's debts and situation might somehow reflect on her." Martha made a dismissive noise. "Wickham likes to throw his weight around. Don't you worry about him, Lily. Most folks in Timber Creek know exactly what kind of man he is and what kind of man your father is, for that matter. No one blames you for what happened. But what if he's right?" Lily asked. "What if staying here does cause problems? For you, for the store?" "Nonsense," Martha declared firmly. "Henry and I own this building outright, and our business is doing just fine. Wickham has no hold over us." She patted Lily's hand. "Don't let him chase you away." "That's exactly what he wants." Lily nodded, grateful for the older woman's reassurance, though a seed of worry remained planted in her mind. Later that afternoon, when Preston prepared to return to the double tea for the evening, Lily walked him to the edge of town. "I've been thinking," he said as they reached the point where the main street gave way to open country. "About what Wickham said." Lily tensed. "You don't think he's right, do you?" "No," Preston said quickly. "Not about you causing trouble, but he did make me realize something." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I don't have much to offer you, Lily. No land, no money to speak of, just my hands and my word." "Preston," he held up a hand. "Let me finish, please. I know we haven't known each other long, but these past days have been the happiest I've had in years. There's something between us, something real and good. I feel it, and I think you do too." Lily's heart was pounding. "I do," she said softly. Preston took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for any promises now. It's too soon, and you've been through too much. But I want you to know that I'm staying not just for a few weeks, not just until the roundup is done. I'm going to find a way to make a life here if you'll give me a reason to." Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "I think I'd like that very much," she whispered. Preston's smile was like sunrise after a long night. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, almost reverent touch of lips that nonetheless sent warmth coursing through Lily's entire body. When they parted, both a little breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Early start tomorrow." Lily nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him mount his horse and ride away, her heart lighter than it had been in years despite Wickham's threats and her father's rejection. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free to choose her own path, and increasingly certain of the direction it would take. The following Wednesday, Lily was alone in the store when Sheriff Miller entered, his expression grave. The bell's cheerful jingle seemed at odds with the somber look on his face. "Miss Sullivan," he said, removing his hat, "I'm afraid I have some news." Lily set down the bolts of fabric she'd been organizing, a sense of foreboding washing over her. "What is it, Sheriff?" Miller twisted his hat in his hands, clearly uncomfortable. "It's your father, Miss Lily. There was an incident at the saloon last night. He'd been drinking heavily, got into an argument with some cowhands from the Circle B." Lily's hands gripped the counter. "Is he hurt?" "No, madam, not physically," Miller said. "But in his anger he made some threats against you and against Northcott, specific threats that I can't ignore." "What kind of threats?" Lily asked, her mouth suddenly dry. "He said he'd see Northcott dead before letting him steal his property, meaning you, Miss Lily. Said if he couldn't have the benefit of you, then neither would any other man." Miller looked pained. "He was waving a gun around, firing into the ceiling. I had to lock him up for the night." Lily closed her eyes briefly. "Where is he now?" "I released him this morning once he'd sobered up," Miller said. "Warned him to stay away from town and away from you, but I thought you should know." He hesitated. "Miss Lily, your father's not well. The drinking's gotten worse, and there's talk that he's about to lose the ranch to Wickham." Lily nodded slowly. Despite everything, she felt a pang of sadness for the man her father had become. "Thank you for telling me, Sheriff. I'll be careful." "See that you do," Miller said seriously. "And tell Northcott to watch his back. I'll keep an eye out when I can, but I can't be everywhere." After the sheriff left, Lily moved through the rest of her day in a fog of worry. She wanted to ride out to the Double T to warn Preston, but she knew that leaving town alone would be foolish with her father in such a state. Instead, she wrote a note and asked the butcher's son, who was making deliveries to outlying ranches, to take it to the Double T for her. That evening, as she was helping Martha prepare supper, a commotion outside drew them to the window. Preston was dismounting in front of the store, his face grim. "Stay here," Martha told Lily, but she was already heading for the door. Preston met her on the porch, his eyes scanning the street behind her as if expecting trouble. "I got your note," he said without preamble. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Lily assured him, "but I'm worried about you." "If my father's making threats, I can handle Samuel Sullivan," Preston said firmly. "You don't know him like I do," Lily insisted. "When he's been drinking, he's capable of anything. And if he blames you for losing the ranch," Preston took her hands in his. "Lily, listen to me. I'm not afraid of your father, but I am concerned for your safety. If he's desperate enough to make public threats, there's no telling what he might do." Martha appeared in the doorway behind them. "You two come inside," she said. "This isn't a conversation for the street." Over supper, they discussed the situation. Henry Peterson, usually the quietest member of the household, had strong opinions on this matter. "Sullivan's been heading for trouble for years," he said. "Ever since Elizabeth died, he's been drinking himself to ruin. The drought just gave him an excuse." "The question is what to do now," Martha said practically. "Lily can't stay cooped up in the store forever, and you, Mr. Northcott, have work out at the Double T." Preston nodded. "I've spoken to the foreman. He's agreed to let me stay in town at night for the time being, ride out each morning. It means longer days, but I'll be closer if there's trouble." Lily felt a rush of gratitude, mingled with guilt. "You shouldn't have to rearrange your life because of my father." Preston's gaze softened when he looked at her. "It's not just because of your father," he said quietly. The next few days passed without incident. Preston rode out to the Double T each morning at dawn and returned each evening, taking a room above the livery stable as Henry had suggested. He and Lily spent their evenings together, sometimes at the Petersons', sometimes walking by the creek or sitting on the porch of the boarding house where many of the town's unmarried men took their meals. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Lily found herself sharing stories of her childhood, of her mother's gentle wisdom and love of beauty, of the ranch as it had been before drought and grief had changed everything. Preston spoke of his own parents, of the Colorado ranch he had lost, and of his dreams of someday having land of his own again. "Not in Colorado," he told her as they sat on the creek bank one evening, watching the sunset paint the water gold. "I couldn't go back there. Too many ghosts. But somewhere like this, maybe. Wyoming's got good land when the rains come right." "Do you think you could be happy here?" Lily asked. "In Timber Creek, I mean." Preston looked at her, his eyes serious. "I think I could be happy anywhere as long as you were there." The words sent a thrill through Lily. They hadn't spoken explicitly of marriage or a shared future, but it hovered between them, an unspoken promise growing stronger by the day. On Saturday, a week and a half after Lily's rescue, Martha insisted that they attend the monthly social at the church hall. "You can't hide away forever," she declared. "People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," Lily said, though the thought made her uncomfortable. She had never been the subject of gossip before, had always been the quiet rancher's daughter who kept to herself and did as she was told. "It's not that," Martha said gently. "It's that if you and Preston continue to see each other, but only in private, it gives the impression that you have something to be ashamed of. And you don't, Lily. You've done nothing wrong." So it was that Lily found herself preparing for her first social event since her ordeal. Martha helped her style her hair and loaned her a pretty shawl to dress up the nicest of her daughter's hand-me-down dresses. "You look lovely, dear," the older woman said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Preston won't be able to take his eyes off you." Lily blushed, but couldn't deny the flutter of excitement at the thought of dancing with Preston, of being seen publicly as a couple for the first time. The church hall was decorated with spring flowers and lit by lanterns when they arrived. A small group of local musicians was tuning up in one corner, and tables laden with food lined the walls. Nearly everyone in Timber Creek seemed to be there, from young children running between the adults' legs to the oldest residents seated in chairs of honor near the refreshments. A momentary hush fell over the gathering when Lily entered with the Petersons, followed by a wave of greetings and nods. She felt exposed under the curious gazes, but Martha's steady presence beside her gave her courage. Preston arrived a few minutes later, looking more polished than Lily had ever seen him. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt crisp, and he wore a clean vest that Lily suspected he had borrowed from someone at the ranch. When he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her heart skip. He crossed the room to her side, nodding respectfully to the Petersons before turning his full attention to Lily. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The musicians struck up a lively tune and couples began to form on the dance floor. Preston offered Lily his hand. "May I have this dance?" For the next hour, Lily forgot about her father's threats, about Wickham's calculating gaze, about the curious eyes of the townspeople. She focused only on the joy of moving to the music in Preston's arms, on the warmth in his blue eyes when he looked at her, on the sense that despite the chaos of recent events, she had somehow found exactly where she was meant to be. During a pause between dances, as Preston went to fetch them cups of punch, Sheriff Miller approached Lily. "Nice to see you enjoying yourself, Miss Lily," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just wanted to let you know that I've had word your father's back at the ranch. Hasn't been seen in town for a few days." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lily said, relieved. Perhaps her father had calmed down, had decided to focus on saving his ranch rather than pursuing vengeance. "Still, be careful," Miller cautioned. "Men like your father, they can nurse a grudge for a long time." Preston returned with the punch just as Miller walked away. "Everything all right?" he asked, noting Lily's expression. She nodded. "Just news about my father. He's back at the ranch, apparently." "Good," Preston said firmly. "The further he stays from you, the better." As the evening wore on, Lily noticed Harold Wickham standing near the door, observing the gathering with his usual cold detachment. When he saw her looking his way, he inclined his head slightly. His thin lips curved in that same mockery of a smile she remembered from outside the church. Preston followed her gaze and frowned. "That man gives me a chill," he admitted quietly. "The way he looks at you. Like I'm a possession he was cheated out of," Lily agreed. "I've seen that look all my life from my father, from men like Wickham. As if being born female meant I was something to be traded or claimed." Preston's hand tightened around hers. "Not anymore," he said fiercely. "Never again." The intensity in his voice made Lily look up at him in surprise. What she saw in his eyes took her breath away, a devotion so profound it seemed to radiate from him. "Lily," he began, then hesitated. "There's something I need to ask you, but this isn't the place. Will you meet me tomorrow at our spot by the creek?" "Our spot?" The simple phrase made Lily's heart swell. "Yes," she said, "of course." The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. As they danced the final dance of the night, a slow waltz that brought them close together, Lily allowed herself to imagine a future with Preston, a home of their own, children with his blue eyes and determined chin, a life built on mutual respect and love rather than ownership and fear. When he walked her back to the Petersons' store at the end of the night, Preston kissed her on the porch, a longer and more ardent kiss than their first had been. "Until tomorrow," he whispered when they finally parted. Lily watched him walk away, her fingers touching her lips where his had been, certain that tomorrow would bring a question that would change her life forever. She woke the next morning to the sound of raised voices from the street below. Throwing on a robe, she hurried to the window in time to see Sheriff Miller and several townsmen gathered around something or someone on the boardwalk. Fear clutched at her heart. She dressed hastily and rushed downstairs, finding Martha already at the store's door, her face pale with concern. "What's happening?" Lily asked. Martha turned to her, hesitating. "Lily, dear, perhaps you should," but Lily was already pushing past her onto the porch. The crowd parted slightly, and she saw Preston on the ground, his face bloody, one eye swollen shut. Sheriff Miller was kneeling beside him while the town doctor hurried across the street with his bag. "Preston," Lily cried, rushing to his side, his good eye focused on her with difficulty. "Lily," he mumbled through split lips, "I'm sorry. What happened?" She demanded, looking up at Sheriff Miller. "Who did this?" Miller's expression was grim. "Found him like this behind the livery. Looks like someone caught him by surprise, worked him over pretty good." "My father," Lily said immediately, rage and fear churning inside her. "It must have been." "Could be," Miller acknowledged. "But Mr. Northcott here hasn't been able to tell us much yet." The doctor pushed through, setting his bag down beside Preston. "Let me through, please. I need to examine him." Reluctantly, Lily moved back, allowing the doctor space to work. Preston's eye, since one was swollen completely shut, followed her, an apology written in his pained gaze. "Let's get him inside," the doctor said after a brief examination. "Nothing's broken that I can tell, but he's taken a severe beating." Several men helped carry Preston into the Petersons' store, where Martha had hastily cleared a space in the back room. The doctor shooed everyone out except Lily, who refused to leave, and Martha, who efficiently began preparing clean water and bandages. As the doctor cleaned Preston's wounds, he gradually became more coherent. "Ambushed," he managed to say. "Coming back from feeding my horse. 2 men, didn't see their faces." "Did they say anything?" Sheriff Miller asked, having returned after dispersing the crowd outside. Preston winced as the doctor dabbed at a cut on his cheek. "Said I should leave town, said I'd taken what belonged to another man." Lily's hands clenched into fists. "It was my father, I know it was." "Maybe," Preston agreed weakly, "or men working for him. Or Wickham," Lily finished, the realization dawning. "He was at the social last night watching us." Sheriff Miller stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Either one's possible. Both have reason to want you separated." He looked at Preston. "You're lucky they stopped at a beating. Men like Sullivan and Wickham, they're not known for half measures." "Which means they might try again," Martha said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "I'll keep an eye out," Miller promised. "And I'll have a talk with both Sullivan and Wickham, but without proof." "I won't leave town," Preston said firmly, attempting to sit up and wincing with the effort. "If that's what they want, they won't get it." "Preston, be reasonable," Lily pleaded. "If they're willing to do this, what might they try next?" "I'm not abandoning you," Preston said, his good eye fierce despite his injuries. "And I'm certainly not letting men like that dictate my life or yours." The doctor finished his ministrations and packed up his bag. "Rest," he instructed Preston. "Those ribs are badly bruised if not cracked." No riding for at least a week. After the doctor and sheriff left, Martha discreetly withdrew, leaving Lily alone with Preston in the small back room of the store. "You're a stubborn fool," she told him, tears threatening despite her attempt at a firm tone. A smile tugged at the corner of Preston's swollen mouth. "So I've been told. Usually right before someone tells me I'm going to get myself killed." "Don't joke about that," Lily said sharply. "My father is dangerous, Preston, and if it was Wickham behind this, he's even more dangerous in his way." Preston reached for her hand, his movements careful to avoid jarring his injured ribs. "Lily, listen to me. I've spent 2 years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections or put down roots. I was existing, not living." His fingers tightened around hers. "And then I found you. Or you found me. Either way, I'm not running. Not from your father, not from Wickham, not from anything." Lily looked down at their joined hands. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." "Nothing that's happened has been because of you," Preston said firmly. "Your father's actions are his own, so are Wickham's, and so are mine." He winced slightly as he shifted position. "Which reminds me, this isn't exactly how I planned it, but I still have a question to ask you." Lily's heart began to race. "Preston, you need to rest. We can talk later." "No," he insisted. "I've waited long enough." With an effort that clearly caused him pain, he pushed himself up into a more dignified sitting position. "Lily Sullivan, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not hiding away from your father or Wickham or anyone else." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks, but they were tears of joy mingled with fear. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." "But Preston, where will we go? What will we do? My father won't stop, and neither will Wickham." "I've been thinking about that," Preston said, some of the tension leaving his body at her acceptance. "I spoke with the foreman at the Double T yesterday. They're pleased with my work, and they're looking for someone more permanent, someone who might eventually take on more responsibility." He squeezed her hand. "It's not my own spread, not yet, but it's a start. A good one." "The Double T is 30 miles from here," Lily said, understanding dawning. "Far enough that my father wouldn't just happen by," Preston nodded. "And under the protection of the biggest ranch in the territory. Your father might be reckless, but he's not foolish enough to make an enemy of the Double T." Hope blossomed in Lily's chest. When can we go?" "As soon as I'm well enough to ride," Preston said. "The foreman's wife has a small cabin we can use until we can build something of our own. It's not much, but it sounds perfect," Lily said fervently. "Absolutely perfect." The next week was a whirlwind of preparation and anxiety. Preston recovered quickly, though his face remained bruised and tender. True to his word, Sheriff Miller spoke with both Samuel Sullivan and Harold Wickham, but both men denied any involvement in the attack. Sullivan had apparently laughed in the sheriff's face, saying that if he'd wanted to hurt Preston, the drifter would be dead, not just bruised. Wickham's denial had been more circumspect. According to Miller, the banker had expressed shock and concern, offering a reward for information about the attackers. "All very proper," Miller had said skeptically, "and about as genuine as a $3 bill." Martha helped Lily prepare for her new life, gifting her with household essentials, clothing, and practical advice about marriage and homemaking. Henry contributed a fine hunting rifle. "Every home needs protection," he said gruffly, and the promise to send supplies out to the Double T whenever they needed them. Word of the engagement spread quickly through Timber Creek. Most reactions were positive. Lily had grown up among these people, and they were happy to see her escaping the shadow of her father's cruelty. A few, particularly Wickham's circle of business associates, were cooler, viewing Preston with suspicion as an outsider who had disrupted the natural order of things. Lily half expected her father to appear at any moment, raging and threatening, but there was no sign of him. According to gossip that reached town, he had barricaded himself at the ranch, drinking heavily and firing at anyone who approached. The hands who had worked for him had all quit, leaving Samuel Sullivan alone with his bitterness and failing land. 5 days after the attack, Preston was deemed fit to travel by the doctor. The foreman of the Double T, a weathered man named Jenkins who had come to town specifically to escort them, declared that they would leave at first light the following morning. Best to be on the road early, he advised. Less chance of complications. That evening, Martha insisted on hosting an impromptu wedding supper, inviting a few close friends to celebrate with them. The town's minister performed a simple ceremony in the Petersons' parlor, with Martha and Henry standing as witnesses. "Not quite the wedding I dreamed of for you," Martha whispered to Lily as they prepared for the ceremony. "But perhaps when you're settled, you can have a proper celebration." Lily, looking at her simple dress, the nicest of Martha's daughter's hand-me-downs, hastily altered to fit her and the wildflowers Preston had picked for her to carry, shook her head. "This is perfect," she said sincerely. "Having people who truly care for us, who support our choice, that means more than any grand ceremony." The wedding was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed Lily with a tenderness that made the small gathering break into applause. For that evening, at least, they could forget the threats hanging over them and simply celebrate the beginning of their life together. They spent their wedding night in Preston's room above the livery stable, hardly a romantic setting, but made special by the knowledge that it was their first night as husband and wife. Preston, still healing from his injuries, was gentle and patient, and Lily discovered a depth of passion within herself that she had never suspected existed. In the pre-dawn darkness, they rose and dressed quietly. Jenkins was waiting for them with 3 horses, 2 for riding and 1 packed with their meager possessions. Martha and Henry came to see them off, Martha weeping openly while Henry stood stoic but misty-eyed. "You write to us," Martha insisted, embracing Lily fiercely. "Every week, you hear me. And visit when you can." "I will," Lily promised, "and thank you for everything." As the eastern sky began to lighten, they mounted their horses and set off, Jenkins in the lead, following the road that would take them north to the Double T. Lily didn't look back at Timber Creek as it faded into the distance. Instead, she looked ahead, to the horizon where their future waited. The journey to the Double T took most of the day. They rode at a steady pace, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and to allow Preston, still recovering from his injuries, to stretch his aching muscles. Jenkins, a man of few words, seemed content to lead them in silence, only occasionally pointing out landmarks or commenting on the weather. As the sun began its descent, they crested a rise and Jenkins reined in his horse. "There she is," he said with quiet pride. "The Double T." Before them stretched a valley, lush with spring grass, dotted with hundreds of cattle. In the distance, a collection of buildings formed the heart of the ranch, a large main house, bunkhouses for the hands, barns, corrals, and several smaller cabins scattered at respectful distances. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, drinking in the sight of her new home. Jenkins nodded. "Best spread in the territory. The Taylors, they own the place, they're good people. Fair employers, fair neighbors." He glanced at Preston. "They know quality when they see it. They wouldn't have offered you a position if they didn't think you had potential." They rode down into the valley as the setting sun cast long shadows across the grass. As they approached the main compound, a woman emerged from the largest house, shading her eyes against the sunset to watch their arrival. "That's Mrs. Taylor," Jenkins explained. "She's been getting your cabin ready." Clara Taylor proved to be a robust, practical woman in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and keen eyes that missed nothing. She greeted them warmly, congratulating them on their marriage and immediately ushering Lily toward a small cabin set a little apart from the main buildings. "It's not much," she said as she showed them inside, "but Robert and I started in a place not much bigger, 30 years ago." The cabin was indeed small, just 2 rooms, a main living area with a stove and table, and a bedroom just large enough for the bed that dominated it. But it was clean and solid, with a small porch facing the setting sun, and someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the table as a welcoming touch. "It's perfect," Lily said sincerely. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Taylor." "Clara, please," the older woman insisted. "We're informal out here. Now I've stocked the pantry with enough to get you through a few days, and there's a ham for your supper tonight. Preston, Robert wants to see you in the morning after breakfast. He'll get you settled with your duties." She patted Lily's arm. "And you and I can talk tomorrow about how things work here at the Double T." After Clara left, Lily and Preston stood in the center of their new home, looking at each other with a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and joy. "Mrs. Northcott," Preston said softly, taking her hands in his. "Welcome home." That night, as they lay in their bed in their home, Lily felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The fear and tension of the past weeks seemed distant, replaced by a sense of possibility and hope. "You think they'll find us here?" she asked quietly, her head resting on Preston's chest. He stroked her hair gently. "They might try, but we're not alone anymore. We have the Taylors, the ranch hands, a whole community that will stand with us." His arms tightened around her. "And even if they do find us, it doesn't matter. You're my wife now. No one can change that." Lily lifted her head to look at him in the moonlight filtering through the cabin's small window. "I love you, Preston Northcott." His smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And I love you, Lily Northcott, now and always." The following weeks were a time of adjustment and discovery. Preston took to his new duties with enthusiasm, quickly earning the respect of the other ranch hands with his work ethic and skill. Lily, meanwhile, learned the rhythms of life on a large ranch from Clara Taylor, who took her under her wing with motherly affection. Their small cabin gradually became a home, filled with small touches that reflected their growing life together. Wildflowers in a jar on the table, a quilt Clara helped Lily make for their bed, Preston's favorite chair positioned to catch the evening light for reading. As spring gave way to summer, news reached them from Timber Creek. Martha Peterson wrote regularly, keeping them informed of local happenings. Harold Wickham, it seemed, had finally foreclosed on the Sullivan ranch. Samuel Sullivan, rather than accept defeat gracefully, had set fire to the barn and several outbuildings before leaving, a final act of defiance that had nearly spread to neighboring properties. "They say he's headed for Montana," Martha wrote. "Good riddance, I say. Timber Creek is better off without him, and so are you, my dear Lily." The letter brought mixed emotions for Lily. Relief that her father was gone, unlikely to trouble them further. Sadness for the man he had become, so consumed by bitterness that he would destroy rather than surrender. And a strange sense of closure, the final severing of ties to her old life. Summer passed in a haze of hard work and quiet happiness. Preston proved himself invaluable to the Double T, his knowledge of cattle and horses earning him increased responsibility and the respect of Robert Taylor. Lily, meanwhile, created a comfortable home and helped Clara with various ranch duties, from gardening to tending the chickens to cooking for the hands during roundup. As autumn approached, Lily made a discovery that filled her with equal parts joy and trepidation. She was expecting a child. When she shared the news with Preston, his response was everything she could have hoped for. He lifted her off her feet in a gentle embrace, his face alight with wonder and pride. "A child," he kept saying. "Our child, Lily. A new life we've made together." Clara Taylor, when told the news, was similarly delighted. She immediately began planning for the baby's arrival, offering advice and practical assistance, insisting that Lily rest more and teaching her what to expect in the months ahead. "Spring babies are lucky," she declared. "Born when the world is new. Your little one will arrive just as the wildflowers are blooming." As Lily's body changed, growing round with the child within, Preston became even more protective, though he was careful not to smother her independence. He took on extra work to save money for the baby's needs, and in the evenings, he would sit with Lily on their porch, his hand resting gently on her growing belly, talking softly to the child they both already loved. Winter came to Wyoming, bringing snow and bitter cold. The work of the ranch continued, though at a different pace, focused more on survival and maintenance than expansion. Preston rode out each day with the other hands to check on the cattle, ensuring they had access to feed and water, returning each evening with rosy cheeks and stories of the day's challenges. Lily, now visibly pregnant, kept busy with indoor tasks, preparing for the baby and helping Clara with the endless work of running the main house. The two women grew close during these winter months, and Lily came to see Clara as the mother figure she had lost so many years before. Christmas brought a rare visit from Martha and Henry Peterson, who braved the winter roads to spend the holiday with them. They arrived laden with gifts, practical items for the baby, books and small luxuries for Lily, tools and warm clothing for Preston. "Just look at you two," Martha marveled as they sat around the cabin's table, sharing a festive meal. "Married, a baby on the way, a good position on the best ranch in the territory. Who would have thought, less than a year ago, that this is where you'd be?" "Not me," Lily admitted, thinking back to those dark days in her father's barn. "Sometimes I still can't believe this isn't a dream I'll wake from." Preston's hand found hers under the table, his touch a reassurance that this was indeed their reality, hard-won but entirely real. The new year brought news from Timber Creek that gave them both pause. Harold Wickham, according to Martha's latest letter, had been asking questions about them, specifically about their whereabouts. "Don't worry," Martha hastened to add. "No one's telling him anything. The general feeling in town is that you two deserve your happiness, free from interference. But I thought you should know he's still nursing a grudge." Preston frowned as Lily read him the letter. "I don't like it," he said. "Wickham's not the type to let things go easily." "What could he possibly do?" Lily asked. "We're married, established here. My father's gone. What claim could Wickham have on either of us?" "None," Preston agreed. "But men like that, they don't like being thwarted. And we did thwart him, didn't we? You by refusing to be traded to him, me by helping you escape." Lily rested her hands on her swollen belly. "Should we be worried?" Preston considered, then shook his head. "Cautious, maybe, but not worried. As you say, we're established here. The Taylors value us. And Wickham's power doesn't extend this far." Still, they both found themselves watching more carefully in the weeks that followed, alert to any strangers arriving at the ranch, any unusual occurrences. But winter deepened, the snow piled higher, and life continued its steady rhythm. In late February, as the first hints of spring began to appear, Clara Taylor arranged a surprise for Lily, a gathering of the ranch women, to prepare for the baby's arrival. They brought gifts of handmade blankets, tiny clothes, practical items for a newborn, and most valuable of all, advice and stories from their own experiences of motherhood. Lily, surrounded by these kind women, many of whom had started as strangers but were now friends, felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. This was community, not the strained, judgmental relationships she had known in Timber Creek, where her father's reputation had always colored how people saw her, but genuine connection based on shared experiences and mutual support. March brought the first real thaw, and with it, increased activity on the ranch as preparations began for spring calving. Preston was busier than ever, often returning home after dark, tired but satisfied with the day's work. "Robert says if this year goes well, he might consider me for foreman when Jenkins retires next year," he told Lily one evening as they sat by the fire. "It would mean more responsibility, but also better pay. Maybe enough to start thinking about our own place someday." Lily smiled, imagining it a small ranch of their own, built with their own hands, a legacy for the child who would soon join them. "I'd like that," she said. "Not that I'm not grateful to the Taylors, but having something that's truly ours would be different," Preston finished for her. "I know. I feel the same." As March gave way to April, Lily's time drew near. Clara checked on her daily, bringing supplies and reassurance. The ranch's proximity to a doctor who lived on a neighboring property was a comfort, though many children on the frontier were born with only the assistance of experienced women. On a mild April morning, with wildflowers just beginning to dot the prairie as Clara had predicted, Lily's labor began. Preston, frantic with worry despite Clara's calm assurances, was banished to the porch where he paced restlessly, jumping at every sound from within the cabin. The labor was long and difficult, but as the sun began to set, a new cry joined the sounds of the ranch, the strong, indignant wail of a healthy baby boy. "He's perfect," Clara announced, placing the swaddled infant in Lily's arms. "A fine son for you both." Preston, finally allowed inside, approached the bed with reverence, his eyes wide with wonder as he gazed down at his wife and newborn son. "Lily," he breathed, unable to find other words. "Would you like to hold him?" Lily asked, smiling despite her exhaustion. With trembling hands, Preston accepted the small bundle, cradling his son as if he were made of the most delicate glass. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father." He looked at Lily, his eyes shining with tears. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names before, but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking at the tiny face with its shock of dark hair, Preston's hair, and the determined set of his little jaw, Lily knew. "Matthew," she said. "After my mother's father, he was a kind man, strong but gentle. I'd like our son to have his name." "Matthew Northcott," Preston said, trying it out. "It's a good name, a strong name." As Clara discreetly left to give the new family privacy, Preston sat carefully on the edge of the bed, still holding their son. With his free arm, he gathered Lily close, creating a circle of love around the child they had created together. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For this? For everything. For trusting me that night in the barn, for being brave enough to leave everything you knew, for loving me enough to build this life with me." His voice was thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this again, a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me all of that, Lily." "We gave it to each other," she corrected gently. "And now we've given it to Matthew." As night fell over the Wyoming prairie, the small cabin glowed with lamplight and new life. Outside, the stars appeared one by one, witnesses to the miracle of family created not from obligation or ownership, but from choice and love. Lily, watching her husband cradle their son, thought back to that desperate night nearly a year before, locked in a barn, facing a future not of her choosing, rescued by a stranger who became her heart's companion. The journey from there to here had not been easy, but every step, every challenge had led to this moment of perfect joy. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that whatever the future held, whether Wickham still nursed his grudge, whether her father ever returned, whether they achieved their dream of land of their own, they would face it together, stronger for the love they shared and the family they had created. In the years that followed, the story of how Preston Northcott had broken down a barn door and told Lily Sullivan, "You're free now," became something of a legend among the children who eventually filled their home. Matthew was joined by 2 sisters and another brother, each birth a celebration, each child a new expression of the love that had begun that night. The Northcotts did eventually acquire land of their own, a modest spread adjoining the Double T, where Preston had indeed risen to foreman before striking out on his own. They built their ranch carefully, with patience and hard work, creating something sustainable that would outlast them. Harold Wickham faded from their lives, his grudge apparently cooled by time and distance, or perhaps by the realization that some things like true love and freedom of choice could not be bought or controlled. Samuel Sullivan never returned to Wyoming, though occasional rumors reached them of a bitter old man drinking himself to death in Montana mining camps. These shadows from the past grew fainter with each passing year, overwhelmed by the brightness of the life Lily and Preston built together. Their home became known as a place of warmth and welcome, their marriage a model of partnership based on mutual respect and enduring love. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch watching the stars emerge, they would sometimes speak of that first night of a desperate girl locked in a barn, of a drifter with nothing to offer but his courage and his heart, of the moment when freedom and love became possible in a single act of defiance against cruelty and control. "I knew, you know," Preston would sometimes say, "the moment I saw you in that barn that my life was about to change. I didn't know how or why, but I knew you were important." And Lily would smile, resting her head against his shoulder, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as rescue had become something far more profound, a life chosen freely, a love given without reservation, a freedom that neither barn doors nor fathers nor societal expectations could ever again constrain.